today we're actually talking about building a sales team.
What's the success rate of hiring in general? And then in salespeople, was that a harder one? Right, I mean, some of us that have grown up doing this, right, we take it for second nature. What do you mean you can't talk on two phones, listen to a customer in front of you, and you got the voice line running in the background? Right, we invented multitasking, right? Can you do this business with a poor memory? Can you do this business if you're a habitual liar? Right? If you're afraid to take a punch, can you sell parts in this business?
All right. Well, that's basically what we're talking about here is if you want to add to your team, continue to add to your team, then this is kind of where you need to start. And I think where we mess up a lot of times is we don't realize how important it is to actually add the right person. We just usually wait till we need a person, and then we're just trying to scramble. And then in our conversations with sales managers all across the nation, we have 3 sales manager groups that we meet with regularly at Profit Team. And they're very extensive groups with a lot of people in it, and we go over a lot of different subjects. But one of the subjects that's been constant is onboarding, training, hiring. And the prevailing thought in most of those meetings are it takes me 2 people. I hire 2 salespeople to usually get 1 successful one. There are some people that have even went as they've gotten larger. When they need a salesperson, they just hire 2. And they say, what's the worst that can happen? If they both work out, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? So that's been a lot of it. But really, building a successful inside sales team is much more than just who you hire. And it's a lot more than who you hire. But all these things that we're going to talk about, they actually factor into who you hire if you're doing this right. And in our cases, a lot of times that's not the case. And so you need to consider your factors like your structure, your budget, training, tools, and more. And figure these things out before you hire your sales team and add on to your sales team. And so why is structure important? It's like, why would my structure be important? I'm just going to get somebody that can talk to people, relate to people, build relationships. Why is that structure so important? It helps determine where you start when you're finding talent, okay? If I'm open to a remote salesperson, what does that mean that I can hire from? Everywhere.
How many people have a list of criteria that you think are characteristics that you're looking for in a salesperson? A list. An outgoing personality, is that helpful? Right? Being part of a competitive team, is that helpful? Understanding commission rate, flat rate, is that helpful? Right? Past prior experience, is that helpful? What are you looking for? How many people think that prior automotive experience is essential? Right? We have look, I'm a gray-haired guy, right? When I was a kid, you had to know what you were doing in this business, right? Nowadays, knowing that all radiator caps are kind of sort of the same doesn't exactly make money, does it? But knowing how to sell the items does. So those things that come in. How many people have, you look at that and develop questions around identifying those characteristics that you're looking for?
So obviously the on-site, and of course the one that I call the hybrid, that's one that I really actually like a lot. If you can find the right personalities to be remote, that are actually good salespeople, and the right personalities to be on-site, that enjoy the culture of working with one another, you can kind of have the best of both worlds. Because how many of us hired somebody that's a good salesperson, but they're a total a-hole? If you're not raising your hand, you hadn't hired enough salespeople. So I'll just tell you that right now. And so sometimes that person is a great remote salesperson because they do good, they know what they're doing, but I can keep them away from everybody else that they irritate throughout the day, which ends up me putting out fires because of them. So that's an example of how you structure. It helps identify some personality traits that you value when building your team. And I'll give you a good example of self-sufficient versus needy. If my structure is in a way I don't have time, I'm a smaller yard, and we do a lot of different jobs here. I don't have time to stop and babysit you. Then I need to be looking for somebody that doesn't need babysitting. If I have a sales manager in place and that's their job, I don't necessarily mind you needing babysitting. Maybe that's actually a good thing because it reminds my sales manager to stay on top of their sales team. So there are other reasons why structure can actually identify that too. If I don't have a sales manager, it may be a totally different situation.
Well, when you have a mad customer, right? We all have mad customers, right? We don't design it, we don't engineer it, we don't maintain it. We put a better warranty on it than the people that did do all of those things to start with. So when we have a mad customer, right? It's easier to move the customer to a different salesperson than it is to lose the customer, right? So don't we need a unique and diversified staff in order to handle all the personality types that exist and have the ability? So do we start to look at where are the weaknesses in our organization, right? Do we need an aggressive personality type? Do I need a soft spoken personality type? But most of the time we end up going after salespeople or people in general when we need them. And when we need them, how many of the times are we warm pulse, right? Show up, social security number checked, you're hired. Please show up.
You know, and actually when several people, raised their hand, they had hired a salesperson, but nobody hired an unsuccessful one. My first thought was several of those people probably waited too long where it could still be the wrong person and they could still sell enough to look good. I mean, I know that I've seen plenty of people wait so long, they plug somebody in, they're like, that was a great hire. She's already at $75,000 in her second month. And a lot of times you listen to the phone calls, you look at their outbound calls, and you're like, no, that's not a great hire. You haven't even identified the metrics to actually say that. What that is that's somebody plugging in where you had $150,000 worth of sales waiting on them.
Look, we hear this every day, right? How often do you hear somebody, one of our salespeople, on the phone and they're saying things that you're just cringing and wanting to go over there and throttle them, and then it ends up with them getting the order, right? You didn't sell that part. You did everything you could to not sell the part, and the customer still said, I'll take it, right? We have to work and understand the selling aspects of it and how do we get the results that are needed, especially during the time there. Are used auto parts selling at a very high rate right now? Right? Most of us are doing pretty well. What's salesperson's paychecks looking like? Pretty good here lately. So is it the fact that they're really truly doing better, or is it the fact that market circumstances have turned in our favor? Pricing increases, things along that line. Meanwhile, what's happening to the ego of the sales staff? Pointing at the paycheck saying, what do you mean I'm not doing a good job? Right? So it's building these things and continually looking for it. The other thing to keep in mind is how long does it take to get a salesperson in the air flying at an appropriate rate? 2 months of training before they get in. But I mean, you're talking about a fully trained, on the phone, hitting at an average number. You're talking 6 to 12 months is a very realistic thing. So what happens if I wait until I need one? Right? I'm really 6 to 12 months before I really get my solution. So kind of looking at these things and coming back of how do I train this?
But absolutely, I believe that the most thorough training we could give somebody is absolutely the best answer, but it has a lot to do with what else we do. And the last but not least, documenting metrics, stuff like that. If I ask more from my salespeople than another place does, I obviously need to consider whether or not they're detail-oriented. So what else will influence who I hire? Detail or big picture? All right, I have a sales staff that they have to do all their cut sheets. They have to do all their partial credits. They even have to do their regular credits. They have to actually collect their CODs. There are some places that are that way. There are some places like they do nothing but get on the phones. I got everything else handled. Returns come in the back. They handle those. Totally different. So if my structure is telling me that, I need a detail-oriented person if I have a lot of things that they have to do for my company. If not, I might want the big picture person. Why? Because they're probably going to put the throttle to it and get after it, and then I'm just going to help my other staff help keep things going while we train them on exactly what they are messing up, because we all know they're going to screw up plenty of stuff. Influence of your customer base. I'm heavily retail. Is patience good when retail? How many of us, and I've listened to thousands of calls, of sales calls. This year alone, I can't even count how many. This year alone, I've heard more statements from salespeople when I go over the calls with them going, well, that's an idiot. Well, I'm tired of these idiots. Well, I can tell you why you're getting that way, because you used to get nothing but garage and wholesale calls, but now with the emergence of car-part.com, with the retail side, people don't want to pay garages that over. They want to go get their part and then have it taken to the garage if they can. They don't want to pay them. Also, money's a little tighter for a lot of people in the pandemic. So patience is a little bit more important now than it was pre-pandemic, honestly. So the customer base, if I'm a feeder yard, what's more important to me? Somebody that has the gift of gab, if I'm a feeder, and when I say feeder yard, make sure I'm explaining this. I sell to other yards on a consistent basis a lot more than I do my market. So if I'm doing that, what's more important to me? Somebody that has the ability of the gift of gab or somebody that absolutely understands cars? That might be where that part is more important to me, because we all know another yard can sniff out somebody that doesn't know what they're doing way quicker than anybody else. So current management. What if the a-hole I was talking about is actually my sales manager? But they're very effective. But they're not going to necessarily be effective with everybody. I used to have different people. I used to have one guy that I could crawl on him in the morning, and he'd have the best day just to prove to me that I was wrong. And then I had another one that I could crawl on them, and they would crawl in the morning and say, I see dead people, like the movie, you know, and just ruin their whole day. And so my current management structure may depend on the type of personality I'm looking for too. Mind you, everything we're talking about here is you doing your profiling before you even look for somebody. This is you actually building a picture as an artist and saying, this is what I need, before you go to get what you need. So this is where we mess up a lot. Where do I look? I hear this all the time. Where do I go to get another salesperson?
When are we recruiting salespeople? All the time, right? I worked for Ron Sturgeon, speaking next door as we speak, right? I remember very clearly the day in 1987 when he permanently installed a "I'm hiring salesperson" sign out in front of the building, right? We saw it every morning when we pulled into work, right? So the first thing is, where do I look? If we're always looking for salespeople, isn't the first answer everywhere? Yes. Right? Everywhere.
Well, it made me feel bad. I didn't put everywhere on my sheet. But where do I look? Here's why I put current staff on top. More than anything nowadays, culture has become extremely important. Would everybody not agree with that? That's a bigger issue than it ever has been for us. We, as our industry, have very limited capability offering promotions compared to a corporation. Corporation, they can enter in on the bottom level, but see 75 different rungs they could get to. With us, that's not the case. Maybe 2 or 3 different spots, maybe 4, depending on the size of the company, maybe 5.
Look, in a lot of instances, we hire people in at their top level that they're going to be, right? A hireman dismantler, and there is no other level. We have to stop and think about those things.
I like to look at my current staff, because if I can actually add somebody from my current staff, that's good for culture. That's good for the people out back. That's good for the company as a whole. Now, here's the thing. It in no way minimizes what I need. I've just built a profile. If I have nobody on my current staff that fits that profile, don't make the mistake of hiring somebody on your current staff, because it won't help culture if you put them in and they sink and you have to get rid of them. So that is a must. Is when I look at the current staff, that's where I look first. But they definitely have to dot the I's and cross the T's.
Look, current staff, right? I mean, Marty's right here. He's been in business for over 30 years. Anybody ever walk up to you and say, "Hey, Marty, let's hire my brother-in-law. He's a real jerk." Right? But people come up and say, let's hire somebody because they think they're good people, and they do. People want to work with good people. So that is a good referral recommendation, gives you a solid platform to start with. But they still have to have the merits to do the job and fit the role, not just be necessarily recommended by someone who's on the current staff.
And the second one's generic, and it's because you can go to any one of these. I travel all across the country, and I'll go to some place, and they're like, Indeed, I get everything in Indeed. And the next one will say, I can't get nothing off Indeed, ZipRecruiter. The truth is, it's probably more predicated off of your ads and things like that, but they all have their different perks. Employee referrals, competition is another place you can go. And when I say that, we're talking about if you actually see somebody that's a competitor. I have no problem hiring a competitor's person. I don't want to hire somebody I deal with. I don't want to hire somebody that's been good to me or something like that. But if I have a legitimate competitor that has somebody that's more than capable, that's interested in coming, then I will absolutely entertain that. But I will say be careful on that, because you don't want to get the reputation of the person in that. Don't let them near your salespeople.
You want to be careful when it comes to poaching employees. But a simple fact is happy employees tend to not change jobs, right?
So I'm very careful on it, but the truth is this happens in our industry every day.
Look, I just used this example within the last hour, right? It's Friday, right? There's a whole bunch of folks that are getting paid today. They're going to go out with their buddies, drinking at the bar tonight, and they're going to be griping about work, right? I hate this, my paycheck that, the hours this. What I want is a culture in place that when my guy's participating in that conversation says, I'm happy. Right? My deal works. We had company lunch today. We celebrated this. We did that. Why don't you comply for the company? That's kind of where that, where that piece goes to come back is yes. Because one of the things about this is can you, in any of your towns, can you go more than a block without seeing a help wanted sign? So we're in a very competitive deal. We have said, people said we were wrong. We weren't. But people said federal unemployment money is screwing up the market. Lee and I kept saying it's not that. It's not helping, but it's not that. The simple fact is more people are exiting the workforce than entering the workforce. This is not going away anytime soon. So we better get the cultural pieces right on what we're doing in order to attract the people and keep the people, because we are going to continue to need more people. How many people right now have a need for more salesmen? I think that what has happened is the people my age, 56, 57, 58 years old, have come to the realization during the pandemic that they didn't need to go back to work. Right? That whether their parents have passed, they've sold the houses, inheritance, retirement funds that have saved. And during the pandemic, when we were in our shut-in, stay-at-home, lock-ins, found out that they weren't going to go as crazy as what they thought they were. And so now, between part-time work and whatnot, they just decided they're not coming back.
I think that's some of it. But he was more confident on that, where I would say this. I wasn't sure that the government money, when it went away, wouldn't bring people back to the workforce. But what my issue was is I'm not sure those are the people I want. If they're willing to sit on that couch the whole time until the money runs out, am I really getting the type of person I want? So when I do culture and I talk about that, what I wanted is the culture that gets the people that have been working from the other places and let them fill those holes with the people that are coming from the government money. That's the way I want to do that. So you're right on, though.
Well, Marty, I was going to go right there, that I think when you start talking about the characteristics, probably the number one thing to look for at this point in time is work ethic, right? So it's how you go about things. So yes, identification of work ethic is a really, really big part and component of doing this whenever it's, I'm right, Lee's right, somewhere in the middle is right. We still have to overcome of how do we build this, right? I mean, unless you grew up doing this, you don't really understand it. Now, how many of us have dumb lucked into the industry and have been found in heaven, right? This is the greatest place ever and I'm never leaving, in there. So some of it is changing. How do we elevate, right? This is kind of the nice thing about what's going on with the pandemic and the sales is it's really legitimizing our business, right? We're being exposed to people on a constant basis that have either never dealt with a salvage yard or had a negative experience with a salvage yard that are finding out that we aren't 50 years ago as rude and crude as what we were. But what we do with that opportunity is up to us. That's not by default. That's rounding the culture, rounding the people, attracting some of these other people from other industries that have been negatively impacted to come in to generally increase our lowest common denominator of quality, service, and professionalism for doing it. Because isn't that, as a industry, that is one of the big black eyes we continue to fight, is the perception of professional.
It's our job to take the garage that used to only sell reman, that now can't get that reman, that now has to buy the used part from us. We give them the best customer service experience they've ever had. When the reman availability comes back, at that point, at least now I have provided the opportunity for that person to now go to the customer and say, you have two options. Before, it was one option. I only sell reman here. Now I sell recycled in reman because they've done so good for me when I had to use them.
Because that's the opportunity. When we're talking about building a sales team, right? Right now, it's easy because they have no choice. When there is a choice, We have to take advantage of this opportunity right now to say, when there is a choice, still pick us instead of kicking us to the curb the moment that we're no longer useful to what they're doing. And so kind of coming up with doing, because what you're seeing is, how many people are doing duplication of their inventory with somebody on CarPart? Right? I mean, does that sell parts?
Wait, I gotta stop right here. How many people are duplicating inventory from car-part.com with other people's inventory? Not enough hands.
I wasn't going to sell that many more CarPart subscriptions for them that quick.
I hope some of you just aren't raising your hand, because that is a total miss. That is a total miss.
But
because that drives calls.
What we're finding is more and more often the customer is calling and saying, "You show to have." Right? When I first got involved in the salvage industry in 1986, 1987, every phone call started off the same. Do you have? Do you have? Do you have? Not anymore. The overwhelming majority of the time when they say, do you have? Bump them 50 on the price and see what they say. Wait, you show it for? Wait, I thought you said you didn't know I had it. Oh, wow, you know.
You know, I will say, though, everybody, you come to these shows to get better. But the truth is, we all want to make more money, right? I'll just tell you right now, even though we're talking about a sales class, if you aren't doing that, figure out how to work that and figure out how to do that, because that will affect your bottom line more than anything that I say today as far as that part of it, because it drives calls. And then you can educate your sales staff on how to handle those calls and close deals.
And my point of all of that is, if more and more often the customer is informed as to price and availability of the part, then managing the relationship becomes the most important part of all of this, because what I want is for Shan to call me 100% of the time, not just when I electronically seem appealing.
When I used to sell parts, I'd answer 10 calls. Out of 8 of them would be junk parts. When I say that, I mean like, give me a floor mat or something like that I wasn't interested in selling back then. And only 2 would be like engine or transmission and things. Now, what I will agree with Marty is the majority of the time they're getting a call, it's the things that we show, that we sell. And so I do think from a sales standpoint, I'm answering on average more calls that have parts that I can sell than I ever did. But the one thing I will tell you, Marty, is the phone traffic hasn't went down. What has went down is the percentage of our stuff that is done through the phone. So because I monitor over 10 different places at times throughout this year, where I would give them their call numbers. And their call numbers have grown and their quote numbers have grown. But also during that time, their text messaging, their emails, all that's grown more than the phones. So I would agree with you in that part.
When you're looking at your sales force and what's going on, those are all the components that kind of factor in for what do I need and how do I structure a training program to bring somebody along to process the calls that are a lot of cases pre-sold parts that just need some final tuning to get done, while managing the culture of the company to be exhibited to our end user customer that we're after, while we're still growing and cultivating people to move beyond what they think is currently possible.
But Marty, I agree with your point to the point. This is a trick I like to do with sales teams all the time nowadays. How many of you have a customer that knows you have the part every time they call? Never fails. Almost everybody in your sales staff will raise their hand. And then you just look at them and you go, okay, well, who do they call when we don't show the part? Right. And then they give you this blank stare and they're like, and I'm like, you're not being a salesperson. If you're not hearing, can you get me? Can you find me?
Look,
I don't show it.
Is there something such as a too high of a close rate for a salesperson? I disagree with that. I think there is. If a guy's closing 90% of his sales, is he taking enough volume?
He's not taking enough calls where they don't know he has the
Cherry
part.
picking off the top.
Back to the deal, because we're probably going to get through 3 slides. I'm just kidding, really. Personality versus skills. I would tell you statistics show personality outweighs skills about 8 to 2 anymore when it comes to a sales job, believe it or not. And I think a lot of you would believe that. All right, so you found them. You built your profile. You figured out where to go. You found the person. You're like, okay, this is the person, because this is about building a successful team. Now what? You need to evaluate. What is the first day like? What is the first week like? What is the first month like? Because if you take a look at that first day that you have set up for them and you realize, you know what, I don't know how I would feel about that, then you're not setting yourself up to keep people. Because millennials, although, and I will tell you, they get a bad rap, but I've been educating myself on a lot of it. And some of that I blame on us a little bit because they're in an instant gratification mode their entire life. And then we put them into a job that has to sustain longevity, and they're thinking about their next job by noon at the first day of the promotion. And part of that is because their whole life, everything they've ever wanted, I'll text you, I get a text right back. I want something, I order it on Amazon, it's here tomorrow. So it's interesting when I start reading some of the things that have went on to kind of create that. But what I'll tell you is, they're going to end up being a larger part of our workforce as we go forward. So whether we like it or not, we have to learn to actually adjust for that. The first day is hugely important to a millennial. That impression, what's the saying? You only get one time to make a first impression. Although sometimes you have people forget you and you can do it twice. But truth is, it's a big deal with work. If they don't like their first day, it already taints what they're doing. If they don't like their first week of their month, they're already looking somewhere else, and right now they have options. When I start with in training a new sales hire, that sends a message. Do I start with training them on how they can make me more money? Or do I start with training them on ways that they are going to enjoy working for me? Do I start training them? Is one of the first things I bring up is the benefits, the things that I do for them? Or is one of the first things I bring up is what you're going to do for me? It sends a message whether you realize it or not. And it's a wrong message if all you're talking about is, I hired you and here's my expectations for what you're going to do for us. Well, I mean, isn't this a two-way street? So you've got to realize, so them or me or customer, I'm okay with it not being either one of you as long as it's the customer and they understand I'm setting a precedence of customer service experience is huge to us here.
How many people define that out as a contract of employment per se? Right? I mean, there's certain things I'm going to bring to the table. I'm going to give you a computer, I'm going to give you a phone, I'm going to give you all of these things, right? What are you going to give me back? Right? You're going to give me 8 to 5, you're going to give me 5 days a week, you're going to give me all of those things. I mean, laying out and making sure that we have an agreement on the front end of stuff. When we hire a salesperson, we give them a guarantee, right? I mean, nobody can survive off the commission on day one, right? So I'm guaranteeing you something. What are you guaranteeing me? Right? So that kind of starts to make things, because the millennials, when we dog on them, what they really want is accountability, right? And they want an explanation as to the why. More than any other generation, they want to know why. Right? So we got to come in and do the proper explanation. And then, are you happy? Are you happy with us? Right? Have I delivered what I promised you I was going to deliver, to make sure that this truly is a two-way street? Because we make sure we go after the bad hires. Right? I mean, when we make a bad hire, we're on them pretty quick, aren't we? But when we make a good hire, we want to just stick our head in the sand and hope that it stays a good hire because we're happy, and that's wrong. Right? We're going to lose people that way.
One of the best lessons I learned in the corporate environment was actually to account for the people's actually enjoyment of the job. And when you're in the interview process, there were questions that we would ask to try to identify if this person was even overqualified. And I was actually told, don't hire an overqualified person. That sounds crazy, doesn't it? But they're like, you know why? They won't be happy with the job. And if you don't have a promotion in line for them soon, they'll turn around and you'll be replacing them within a month or two, and we're right back where we started. So I'm like, oh, that's crazy. This girl is perfect for this job. Too perfect. That's right. Don't be an idiot. So that was, taking into account that. What are their first goals? Is it numbers? Is it calls? Is it actually just making a customer happy? Or is it actually just making it through the first week? A lot of times when we do group meetings, and somebody will tell them, you don't need to do numbers the first time. You need to come and see how the numbers are discussed between the group members and how the open communication between smart people in a room educate one another. Nothing to do with Mike and I. It has to do with all the smart people that we bring in the room together, right? But one of the first commitments we say to them is can you come to the next meeting? That's really all we're asking. So maybe the goal is really just to say, come back and talk to me after a week, and let's see where we're at in your satisfaction. There's different things that we can do. And so when do I turn them loose? I don't have the perfect answer for that because everybody is different. Everybody trains differently. A lot of people put them with their drivers. They put them with the inventory, and I actually love that because I want them to have an appreciation for the people that get the parts to the customer after they sell the parts.
How many people have a documented training process? I mean, we're talking sales, that would be one, but for all of the stuff, right? I'm pretty sure we're at ARA, are we not? Right? We have something called ARA University, do we not? Right? We've got a lot of money invested in. There's several thousand classes that are in there that are all not necessarily wrecking yard specific, but there's a ton of wrecking yard specific material that's available to us right? I'm really certain that it's now included in our standard ARA membership access. So do you have a list that says a dismantler needs to know X, right? Everybody's aware, right? Forklift safety training is required. Is that correct? Right? Does ARA offer that? Yes, they do. So in there. So do we make sure that ARA, or do we go with, yeah, okay, you said your license were covered, let's go, on there. I mean, documenting those processes.
So they're still here. So we're going to move them on because we feel like we've gotten to that point. So what do? The very first thing is we got to make them understand what is important to the company in terms of customer service expectations. They have to understand that. And I'll give you an example. There's recently a place that I work with. They hired a salesperson, and he's like, this is a great hire. Guy hits 100,000 within the second month. Does 110 or 115 the third month. Problem is that then all of a sudden, all these calls from customers started coming in. And what the guy wasn't informed was, hey, you've got to take care of every customer like they're the most important customer, because that's what we do. Instead, who was the most important customer? This guy, the next one on the phone. So he would have problems, and they would all sit there because the phone's still going to ring. That was the biggest mistake we made in this deal. And I'll tell you right now, I'm at fault with that. That's why I put this on here. I just learned that lesson, how important that is, because I felt like I'll get him going, and we can slow him down and explain that. It's been a nightmare to try to explain that, especially as somebody that's selling 100-something thousand. There's a lot of problems going on. And guess who's actually not happy about it? The rest of the sales staff. Because who's probably having to handle a lot of those problems? The people that know how to. So discuss the key metrics that are important to the company and educate them on what impacts each one. Don't just tell them your broker gross profit is important. Explain to them why. Explain to them how if you sell warranty, typically that brings around 70 to 80% of profit to the bottom line without wrapping apart, without packaging apart, without delivering apart. That's a big part of it. If you can get me broker gross profit, guess what all that money does? It goes towards me and my ability to actually bid more on a vehicle. So there's an impact in that, not only in your pay, and another reason why we value that metric, because it's hard to buy inventory. But if you can get me $100,000 worth of broker gross profit on the bottom line, and I can apply that towards the cars that I bought to help me, I'm a stronger buyer at the auction. No salesperson is going to understand that.
Right. This comes down to teaching people how we make money, right? We intuitively understand how we make money, right? We sell as much as we can in order to produce gross profit. You manage expenses as tightly as you possibly can to create net profit at the end. And we understand that and live that on a daily basis. But if you ask our salespeople, how much does it cost to sell a part? Ask any of our staff. How much does it cost us to sell a part? Right? How much is our cost of goods? Right? You get some pretty wild numbers, because it leads to us being 98% profit margin, which is the polar opposite of reality in most instances. So walking people through and understanding how all the pieces of the puzzle, all the product lines go together, and how all of that works to be a full service salesperson managing the customer's account.
Another one that's important is when and how you implement accountability. Accountability should always be there, but let's be honest. It's a new employee and they screw up. You're not going to talk to them the same way somebody 5 years has been here. So that's a very delicate, fine line, because accountability, really what you need to probably be doing is explaining to them that accountability is coming and that it's already here at a little bit, but you're going to have some understanding. And actually maybe even lay the guidelines of, I don't expect you to make this mistake in 3 months. Things like that, where I'm a little bit of accountability, because now you understand when I'm thinking you should have learned this by, but not necessarily tearing you up to right off the bat. The other thing, organization, which is, by the way, my weakest point ever as a salesperson. I was horrible, and I had to go get help from all kinds of people. But this, you have to lay the law down for them and ask them, how are you going to learn to call people back when you tell them you get pictures, when you tell them you're going to email them on something, when you tell them you're going to call them back after checking on something? I need to know how you're going to do that, because this is an area that they have a difficult problem with and don't realize they're not organized enough until they sell too much. And then same problem. So do not forget, if you want to build a sales team, do not discount organization. I don't know if any of you watched that interview that Rob had with Hammer, and I'm not going to go in the whole detail, but there was an interview there that one of our partners, Rob Rainwater, had, and one of the things that he discussed in his ability to sell what he did was organization. Do not discount that in being successful. All right, they're ready to use what they learned. This is an easy slide to get through, actually, because it's just a matter of you looking and saying, what all tools am I providing them? Am I giving them software like estimating systems maybe that they need? Am I giving them the VIN decoders that they need? Have I even gathered all the best VIN decoders for them and said, here's where you go to get the VIN decode for Mitsubishi compared to, to Isuzu or something like that, or Chevrolet or GM? Well, I guess that would be kind of similar, wouldn't it? But you get what I'm saying. And then in environment, what are you providing them environment? Are they going right in the middle of two other people that are loud talkers? Are they going into an office that's quiet? Are they going at their home? Think about that. Where am I putting them? And what have I identified in the training process that could be a problem when I put them there? Oh, I've realized this person gets distracted easy. I was going to put them right there next to Bob, who likes to talk to people. You're moving over next to Bob. You can handle Bob. They're going over here. Think about these things. You have to think about every detail because you have to set these people up. The best benefit you can have is to be able to hire somebody and make them successful where your competitor couldn't hire them and make them successful. Tell me that's not a benefit. Yes. So think about those things. What kind of guidance are you giving them? The goals, the continued education. Are you offering that? Are you saying, hey, by the way, there's a sales school coming up, and I don't care if it's us or anybody. I'm going to all of them. I'll sit here and name every competitor I have and tell you, go to them all. You cannot be a bad thing to learn something from everybody that you can talk to. That's actually what ARA is about.
On average, McDonald's spends $1,400 a year per person on training, right? Why do they do that? A Big Mac here in Dallas, Texas is the same as a Big Mac in Fort Worth, which is the same as a Big Mac in Syracuse and whatnot. So it's how do you get that in there? And then the other thing is you go to McDonald's, they always say, what, you want fries with that? You want to supersize that? I mean, training in $1,400 a year per person to run a McDonald's.
Make sure they understand that's
right,
available.
Do we spend that? And that is something when we're talking about growing and developing people. I mean, there's ads on television now for companies that are saying they're paying for college, knowing that you're going to quit them after you get your degree, and they're okay with that.
Provide them consistent information. Figure out when they first get on there how often you're going to give them information and be consistent with it until you think that they can pull the information themselves. That's the best way you can do that. You know what's important to you? These things. And I'm going to give these to you every other day or every 3 days until you learn to get them yourself. And by the way, if you want me to, I'll educate you on how to do that. Constant communication is critical at this point, so don't get tired of the process. This, huge. Notice I put an exclamation point. You know why? Because so many people, they train and they're so, like, oh, I'm so glad I'm done with the training. They've been taking my time for forever. And so you go, get on the phones and I'm done. That's the worst time to actually quit communicating with them. This is when you put them on the phones. Every day I'm going to have a powwow with them at some point during the day. Now, I will probably dictate, you can't come in my office all the time, but at 2, we're going to meet together. I want you to write down all your issues. And the only way you come in here is if something has to be done before then. And then that way you can continue to communicate with them until you see them grow. All right, salespeople who don't feel recognized are twice as likely to quit. So make sure, oh great, $50,000. Everybody else selling $150,000. I'm still going to celebrate that 50 like nobody's business for them because that's a big deal for them. And if you act like it wasn't, you're messing up right off the bat, making them feel like they're not important.
Personal best is a personal best, period, end of story.
Yes. Foster an environment that pushes other team members to help them. One thing that you could do, and I've done before in the past, is I know it's difficult because they look at it like they're taking my money. And so I went out to kind of soften the blow before and said, hey, I'll tell you what, we get Jane up to $50,000, everybody gets a $300 bonus. The minute she gets to that. Why did I do that? Because I want you to get some money to help her. I want some motivation so that way you aren't teaming up on her. Because I've seen that recently happen. Place hired 4 team salespeople. They hired 1 extra, and they absolutely just went after that person because that person's cutting into their money. That's a difficult thing. Give them the ability to give you feedback that is taken seriously. Just because they're a new person, oh, they don't know what they're doing. They're giving me feedback. You know what? That's the feedback I value the most. Why? Can't see the forest for all the trees. They haven't been in this place. Sometimes they come in and go, why do you do this? And you're like, I don't know, because we're dumb, because we shouldn't be doing that anymore. I love a fresh perspective. These are big. Not preparing them for the downsides of the job. How many have a credit percentage less than 10%? You're lying. Don't raise your hand because I'll just call you out. All right, listen. Everything they sell, there's going to be probably 1 in 5 that has a problem. Something. Partial, missing, they got to go get another one. It's really bigger than that when you actually take into consideration the things that they have to replace that still get sold. So prepare them. Recently, I had somebody lose a salesperson. He went home for lunch and never came back. Guy was over 100,000. They were so happy. They loved him. They've been telling him, hey, I love your job. I love your job. And then they call him, why are you not coming back? I was not prepared for the negativity that I deal with on a daily basis, and it's worn me down. That could have been actually contact right in the middle and said, listen, this is part, we don't want to tell that because we're trying to get them to come to work. But the truth is, they need to be prepared. Are you a problem solver? Great, because you're going to have some problems to solve. And that's the way it is. But you're also going to make some good money, you're going to make some good sales, and the better you solve them problems, the better you're going to build your customer base. So make sure they know that. Waiting until you need one, we kind of already addressed this. I can take my time and get the right person if I didn't wait too long. Now, I know some of us have people that quit, no notice, and that makes it difficult. Can't help you there. I'm not a magic person. But I can tell you, if I see my growth and I'm growing this much, I'm going to actually pattern that out and say in 6 months, I'm going to need somebody. What's that mean? I better find them now. I better start looking now. It gives me more training. It gives me more ability to go through several applicants and say, I need a dominant personality, and that's the one. And thank goodness I had time to look because I've done talked to 50 people that didn't have the personality I needed. So, discounting work ethic, we kind of touched on that too. Because people don't think sales is work. Oh, it's get the gab. No, it's not anymore. You give me 2, 3, 4 invoices per hour. You give me a certain amount of work orders. You give me a certain amount of quotes. There's a work ethic that goes with this. You need to call people back. You need to follow up on people. This is not an easy job any longer. It's a hard job, one that absolutely everybody's gaining from and getting a lot of credibility by the way we're growing, but they have to work for it. The best salespeople are actually still the hardest workers. And a lot of people forget, oh, I'm a better personality than Johnny. Yeah, but Johnny works harder than you, and he's going to beat you in the end because he's going to call people back. He's going to take care of them. Company culture and its importance. Do not forget this. This guy's got the skills. He sells $200,000 over there. I'm going to bring him in. Yeah, but he's also an a-hole, and he's also somebody that doesn't work well with others, and you don't have the capability of putting him remote, and you're going to bring him in, and you've got a staff that's growing like now. Maybe you take your time and get somebody else. You still need somebody, but that may not be the person. In the end, it may be the person. Maybe everybody's soft, and I need somebody to make them hard. Just consider what I'm doing to my culture. Proper training in multiple areas, not just sales. I got to train them across the board. And I was talking about drivers. That's a great way to start. You know why? We forget drivers are salespeople if we make them salespeople. You know why they're not salespeople? Because we don't tell them they're salespeople. It's the biggest guilt in our whole industry. Who is in the customer's face? The drivers. So I used to tell my salespeople, you're idiots if you aren't going in there giving donuts and your business card to the drivers. You're absolutely idiots. I paid my drivers on commission. You know why? Because I wanted them to stop at the shop that just opened up that nobody knew opened up because they're going to get more money when they do it. And they also had business cards from the salespeople because the salespeople knew they were part of the staff. So that could be an instance of explaining to them why that's so important. Just helps people even indoors and inside to know better.
I hope you enjoyed that. And if you did, miss out on our next conference and expo. We're going to have tons of amazing educational sessions, tech talks, networking with your peers, all of the vendors that you need to speak to take your business to the next level, and amazing amenities. Don't miss out.